The German army, contrary to its traditions, was now deep in politics, especially in Bavaria, where at last it had established a government to its liking. To further its conservative views, it gave the soldiers courses of political instruction, in one of which Adolf Hitler was an attentive pupil. One day, according to his own story, he intervened during a lecture in which someone had said a good word for the Jews. His anti-Semitic harangue apparently so pleased his superior officers that he was soon posted to a Munich regiment as an educational officer, a Bildungsoffizier, whose main task was to combat dangerous ideas, pacifism, socialism, democracy. Such was the Army's conception of its role in the democratic republic it had sworn to serve. This was an important break for Hitler, the first recognition he had won in the field of politics he was now trying to enter. Above all, it gave him a chance to try out his oratorical abilities, the first prerequisite, as he had always maintained, of a successful politician. All at once, he says, I was offered an opportunity of speaking before a larger audience, and the thing that I had always presumed from pure feeling without knowing it was now corroborated. I could speak. The discovery pleased him greatly, even if it came as no great surprise. He had been afraid that his voice might have been permanently weakened by the gassing he had suffered at the front. Now he found it had recovered sufficiently to enable him to make himself heard at least in every corner of the small squad rooms. This was the beginning of a talent that was to make him easily the most effective orator in Germany, with a magic power, after he took to radio, to sway millions by his voice. One day in September 1919, Hitler received orders from the Army's political department to have a look at a tiny political group in Munich which called itself the German Workers' Party. The military were suspicious of workers' parties, since they were predominantly socialist or communist. But this one, it was believed, might be different. Hitler says it was entirely unknown to him. And yet he knew one of the men who was scheduled to speak at the party's meeting which he had been assigned to investigate. A few weeks before, in one of his army educational courses, he had heard a lecture by Gottfried Feder, a construction engineer and a crank in the field of economics, who had become obsessed with the idea that speculative capital, as opposed to creative and productive capital, was the root of much of Germany's economic trouble. He was for abolishing the first kind, and in 1917 had formed an organization to achieve this purpose, the German Fighting League for the Breaking of Interest Slavery. Hitler, ignorant of economics, was much impressed by Feder's lecture. He saw in Feder's appeal for the breaking of interest slavery one of the essential premises for the foundation of a new party. In Feder's lecture, he says, I sensed a powerful slogan for this coming struggle. But at first he did not sense any importance in the German Workers' Party. He went to its meeting because he was ordered to, and after sitting through what he thought was a dull session of some 25 persons gathered in a murky room in the Sternecker beer cellar, he was not impressed. It was a new organization like so many others. This was a time, he says, in which anyone who was not satisfied with developments felt called upon to found a new party. Everywhere these organizations sprang out of the ground, only to vanish silently after a time. I judged the German Workers' Party no differently. After Feder had finished speaking, Hitler was about to leave when a professor sprang up, questioned the soundness of Feder's arguments, and then proposed that Bavaria should break away from Prussia and found a South German nation with Austria. This was a popular notion in Munich at the time, but its expression aroused Hitler to a fury, and he rose to give the learned gentleman, as he later recounted, a piece of his mind. This apparently was so violent that, according to Hitler, the professor left the hall like a wet poodle, while the rest of the audience looked at the unknown young speaker with astonished faces. One man, Hitler says he did not catch his name, came leaping after him and pressed a little booklet into his hands. This man was Anton Drexler, a locksmith by trade, who may be said to have been the actual founder of National Socialism. A sickly, bespectacled man, lacking a formal education, with an independent but narrow and confused mind, a poor writer and a worse speaker, Drexler was then employed in the Munich railroad shops. On March 7, 1918, he had set up a Committee of Independent Workmen to combat the Marxism of the free trade unions and to agitate for a just peace for Germany. Actually, it was a branch of a larger movement established in North Germany as the Association for the Promotion of Peace on Working-Class Lines. The country was then, and would continue to be until 1933, full of countless pressure groups with highfalutin titles. Drexler never recruited more than 40 members, and in January 1919 he merged his committee with a similar group, the Political Workers' Circle, led by a newspaper reporter, one Karl Harrer. The new organization, which numbered less than 100, was called the German Workers' Party, and Harrer was its first chairman. Hitler, who has little to say in Mein Kampf of some of his early comrades, whose names are now forgotten, pays Harrer the tribute of being honest and certainly widely educated, but regrets that he lacked the oratorical gift. Perhaps Harrer's chief claim to fleeting fame is that he stubbornly maintained that Hitler was a poor speaker, a judgment which riled the Nazi leader ever after, as he makes plain in his autobiography. At any rate, Drexler seems to have been the chief driving force in this small, unknown German Workers' Party. The next morning, Hitler turned to a perusal of the booklet which Drexler had thrust into his hands. He describes the scene at length in Mein Kampf. It was 5 a.m. Hitler had awakened and, as he says was his custom, was reclining on his cot in the barracks of the 2nd Infantry Regiment, watching the mice nibble at the breadcrumbs which he invariably scattered on the floor the night before. "I had known so much poverty in my life," he muses, "that I was well able to imagine the hunger and hence also the pleasure of the little creatures." He remembered the little pamphlet and began to read it. It was entitled My Political Awakening. To Hitler's surprise, it reflected a good many ideas which he himself had acquired over the years. Drexler's principal aim was to build a political party which would be based on the masses of the working class, but which, unlike the Social Democrats, would be strongly nationalist. Drexler had been a member of the Patriotic Fatherland Front, but had soon become disillusioned with its middle-class spirit, which seemed to have no contact at all with the masses. In Vienna, as we have seen, Hitler had learned to scorn the bourgeoisie for the same reason, its utter lack of concern with the working-class families and their social problems. Drexler's ideas, then, definitely interested him. Later that day, Hitler was astonished to receive a postcard saying that he had been accepted in the German Workers' Party. "I didn't know whether to be angry or to laugh," he remembered later. "I had no intention of joining a ready-made party, but wanted to found one of my own. What they asked of me was presumptuous and out of the question." He was about to say so in a letter when curiosity won out, and he decided to go to a committee meeting to which he had been invited and explain in person his reasons for not joining this absurd little organization. The tavern in which the meeting was to take place was the Alte Rosenbad in the Herrenstrasse, a very run-down place. I went through the ill-lit dining room in which not a soul was sitting, opened the door to the back room, and there I was face to face with the committee. In the dim light of a grimy gas lamp, 4 young people sat at a table, among them the author of the little pamphlet, who at once greeted me most joyfully and bade me welcome as a new member of the German Workers' Party. Really, I was somewhat taken aback. The minutes of the last meeting were read and the secretary given a vote of confidence. Next came the Treasury report. All in all, the association possessed 7 marks and 50 pfennigs, for which the treasurer received a vote of confidence. This, too, was entered in the minutes. Then the first chairman read the answers to a letter from Kiel, one from Düsseldorf, and one from Berlin, and everyone expressed approval. Next, a report was given on the incoming mail. Terrible, terrible! This was club life of the worst manner and sort. Was I to join this organization? Yet there was something about these shabby men in the ill-lit back room that attracted him. The longing for a new movement which should be more than a party in the previous sense of the word. That evening he returned to the barracks to face the hardest question of my life. Should I join? Reason, he admits, told him to decline. And yet, the very unimportance of the organization would give a young man of energy and ideas an opportunity for real personal activity. Hitler thought over what he could bring to this task. That I was poor and without means seemed to me the most bearable part of it. But it was harder that I was numbered among the nameless, that I was one of the millions whom chance permits to live or summons out of existence without even their closest neighbors condescending to take any notice of it. In addition, there was the difficulty which inevitably rose from my lack of schooling. After 2 days of agonized pondering and reflection, I finally came to the conviction that I had to take this step. It was the most decisive resolve of my life. From here, there was and could be no turning back. Adolf Hitler was then and there enrolled as the 7th member of the Committee of the German Workers' Party.